Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. I am Abhineet Shukla and with me is Nitya Franco bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi sends wishes to Bangladesh's President-elect Mohammad Shahabuddin, says he will be a pillar to improved engagements between both the nations. Defence industry cooperation is an important focus area between India and Bangladesh, says High Commissioner Pranay Verma. India summons the Swiss ambassador and raises concern over anti-India posters in Geneva. United Nations signs the first High Seas Treaty to bring around 30% of the world's water under increased protection. And in cricket, Gujarat Giants set a target of 170 runs for UP Warriors on the second day of Women's Premier League. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has congratulated President-elect of Bangladesh Mohammad Shahabuddin on his election as President of Bangladesh. In a letter sent to President-elect Mohammad Shahabuddin, Prime Minister Modi recalled his contribution as a freedom fighter and experience as a jurist, saying it will contribute a great value to this great office. Calling the relationship between India and Bangladesh as firmly rooted in shared sacrifices, Prime Minister Modi said that this relationship has been nurtured by the vibrant culture and people-to-people ties between the two countries. He further said that as a close friend of Bangladesh, India remains steadfast in its commitment to further deepen the multifaceted partnership for the benefit of the people of both the countries. Prime Minister Modi, in his letter to President-elect Mohammad Shahabuddin, expressed confidence that under your leadership, our engagement will grow from strength to strength. High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh Pranay Verma has said that defence industry cooperation between India and Bangladesh is an emerging focus area of partnership between the two countries. Addressing a seminar on Indian Defence Equipment or SIDE in Dhaka on Sunday, High Commissioner Verma highlighted the accomplishments of the Indian defence industry over the last nearly a decade, driven by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision of Make in India, Make for the World.
The United Nations inked the first High Sea Treaty in a bid to protect the oceans bodies of the world that lie outside the national boundaries and form almost two-thirds of the world's oceans. The treaty is an outcome of a decade of talks for this environmental concern. The agreement was reached on Saturday evening after 38 hours of talks at UN headquarters in New York. The previous negotiations failed to conclude due to the disagreements on funding and fishing rights. The last international agreement on ocean protection was signed 40 years ago in 1982, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The UN High Seas Treaty now brings 30% of the world's oceans into protected domain, puts more money into marine conservation, and sets new rules for mining at sea. Previously, these water bodies were open for fishing, shipping, and to conduct researches, and only about 1% of these waters, also known as high seas, were under protection, which left the marine lives in these waters at high risk of exploitation from threats including climate change, overfishing, and shipping traffic. As per the Red Data Book of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, nearly 10% marine species were found to be at risk of extinction. Further, the IUCN estimates that 41% of the threatened species are also affected by climate change. The High Seas Treaty now places 30% of the world's international waters into protected areas, MPAs, by 2030. The treaty aims to protect against potential impacts like deep-sea mining. This is the process of collecting minerals from the ocean bed. The treaty, amongst other things, will put a restriction on how much fishing can be done in the high seas. According to the International Seabed Authority that oversees licensing, any further activity in the deep seabed will be subject to strict environmental regulations and oversight to ensure that they are carried out sustainably and responsibly. India's Ministry for Environment, Forest and Climate Change Bhupender Yadav has said that India's climate policy is directed towards sustainable development and poverty eradication while striving continuously to decouple emissions from growth and achieve energy efficiency across sectors. Speaking at the Raisina Dialogue in New Delhi on the issue of the next step for climate-smart policies on Sunday, he said, as we enter the third year of the United Nations Critical Decade of Action, with just 7 years remaining to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, Mr. Yadav stressed that under the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, drafting and ensuring execution of climate-smart policies has taken center stage in India. He said climate-smart policies are a very Indian way of life. The term sustainable development may be new, however, the concept is knitted into Indian ethos. The minister said that India's G20 presidency intends to bring an integrated, comprehensive and consensus-driven approach to address climate change and pursue sustainable growth.
The upcoming week offers a series of events in Hyderabad. Focus will be on the second meeting on the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion under the Finance track. Also in the limelight is the Civil 20 Inception meeting scheduled in Nagpur towards the end of this month. Hyderabad is hosting a meeting on the theme of Knowledge and Experience Exchange Program for the Emerging Economies of the Global South from the 4th to 6th of March. It will provide a platform to discuss ways to accelerate development in the Global South. The inaugural session of the event that opened on 4th of March was themed on India and the Global South, a vision for a shared future. It was addressed by G20 India Chief Coordinator Harshvardhan Shringla. Addressing the second meeting of the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, that is GPFI, at HICC in Hyderabad on Sunday, Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, Union Ministry of Finance, Ajay Seth said, the theme One World, One Family, One Future, and that one future cannot be crafted without voicing the concerns of the emerging world. In recent years, the G20 has helped the world navigate through multiple shocks and continues to provide guidance on global economic coordination. India intends to further build upon it to make it even more relevant, especially for the Global South. He said India's G20 presidency is thus an opportunity as well as a responsibility to encourage collective solutions and rebuild trust in multilateralism. India has always stood for a greater role of developing countries in determining our common future, he added. C20, an official engagement group of G20, is a platform for civil society organizations. The inception meeting of Civil 20 will be held in Nagpur from 20th to 22nd of March. About 60 representatives of G20 countries and 250 representatives of various civil society organizations in India and invited countries will participate in this conference. The chairman of Indian Cultural Council Relations, ICCR, and patron of C20 Secretariat, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, said that this will be an opportunity for various civil engagement groups to express their views on the global stage through C20. Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis, India's Sherpa for G20, Dr. Amitabh Kant, will be prominently present in the inaugural session, which will be held under the chairmanship of social and spiritual leader Mata Amritanandamayi. The tagline of C20 is #You are the light, the flame of hope, self-motivation and selfless service, which is in perfect sync with India's G20 vision of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. As a prelude to its inception meeting a few weeks later, the C20 is actively organizing events and seminars to create awareness among the masses. Celebrating International Women's Week, the Civil 20 has planned a C20 Chaupal awareness program with young and adolescents, cisgender women and trans women on winning with HIV, challenges and lessons learned in HIV care for women on March 6th. Also, as a part of the Civil 20 engagements, Vivekananda Kendra Institute of Culture will hold a webinar on diversity, inclusion and mutual respect in association with C20 on the 7th of March. Youth Dreamers Foundation held a C20 Chaupal for women and adolescent girls on their rights and career opportunities in Mohali, Punjab on March 4th. Indian Social Responsibility Network organized a seminar in association with C20 on contribution of civil societies in G20 at Arya Kanya Degree College, Prayagraj on March 3rd. The chief guests of the event were Justice A.R. Masoodi and Justice Ajay Bhanot from Allahabad HC and Lucknow HC, respectively, along with DC Prayagraj Vijay Vishwas Pant, Dean of DU Balram Padi and Dr. Ashutosh Mishra, OSD, Delhi School of Public Policy. These and many other events are being planned and held to bring up the social issues that are often left ignored or sidelined. The C20 summit will be held in Jaipur, Rajasthan on 30 and 31st of July. A recap of the events and activities of the past week under India G20 presidency. The past week was marked by a series of landmark events. However, the spotlight was on the Foreign Ministers meeting and the first meeting of the Anti-Corruption Working Group. The G20 Women's Inception meeting was another attraction. A 2-day-long W20 Inception meeting was organized in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar in Aurangabad in western Indian state of Maharashtra during 26th and 27th of February. The focus was on women in entrepreneurship, women leadership at grassroots, bridging the gender-digital divide, education and skill development, and women and girls as change makers in climate resilience action. 2 more rounds of Inception meetings will be held at Jaipur in Rajasthan during 13th and 14th of April and at the W20 Summit in Mahabalipuram, Tamil Nadu on 15th and 16th of June. Another major event this week was the first Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting of G20 nations in Gurugram in the North Indian state of Haryana during March 1st to 3rd. This is the first ACWG meeting which will be followed up at Rishikesh from 25th to 27th of May for the second ACWG meeting and at Kolkata from 9th to 11th of August for the third ACWG meeting. A side event was also held on the theme of leveraging information and communications technology for combating corruption in public sector. The big story this week was the meeting of G20 foreign ministers in New Delhi during 1st and 2nd of March. The leaders discussed global challenges including climate change, food and energy security, and global supply chain disruptions. The chair's summary and outcome document of the meeting was released at the end of the deliberations. External Affairs Minister of India Dr. S. Jaishankar held a media briefing on the 2nd of March after the foreign ministers meet in New Delhi. He noted that for the first time, G20 foreign ministers discussed the topic of counter-narcotics and called for inclusive and strong international cooperation in this regard. On the sidelines of the G20 foreign ministers meet, the Quad foreign ministers met in New Delhi on the 3rd of March. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi, and Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong attended the meeting. They called for lasting peace in Ukraine and underlined respect for territorial sovereignty and integrity. The Quad foreign ministers said that they will work closely to align and complement Quad's agenda with Japan's presidency of the G7, India's presidency of the G20, and the United States APEC host year in 2023. The G20 conference on materials for sustainable energy was held in Ranchi during 2nd and 3rd of March. The delegates urged the need to work together and solve the energy challenges to achieve carbon emission net zero goals for environment protection and sustainability. The first edition of the Naval Commanders Conference of 2023 will commence on Monday. The conference serves as a platform for naval commanders to discuss important security issues at the military strategic level, as well as to interact with senior government functionaries through an institutionalized forum. The first phase of the Commanders' Conference is being held at sea and for the first time on board India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant.
The first Labour 20L20 meeting is scheduled to be held in Punjab's Amritsar from 19th to 20th of this month. L20 comprises leaders and representatives of trade union centres of G20 countries. They provide analysis and policy recommendations aimed at addressing labour-related issues. Apart from the meeting, the participants of L20 meet would be taken to various excursion sites to showcase the rich cultural heritage of Amritsar.
Indian Navy carried out a successful precision strike by ship-launched BrahMos missile in the Arabian Sea on Sunday. It was done with indigenous seeker and booster designed by the Defence Research and Development Organization (DRDO). In a tweet, the Indian Navy said that the successful test has reinforced its commitment towards Atmanirbharta. The missile test was carried out from a Kolkata-class guided missile destroyer warship. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on rising Indian exports.
Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, welcome to this discussion on India's foreign trade and more specifically on exports. We understand that, in this financial year, the first 10 months, we have clocked somewhere around, $640 billion and Commerce and Industry Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, has expressed confidence that the country's merchandise and services exports would touch, $750 billion this financial year itself. How easy or difficult would that target be?
It is not going to be a difficult target to achieve a figure of $750 billion of exports of merchandise and services. That's because if you look at the published data, in the first 10 months of the current financial year, that is from April 2022 to January 2023, you will notice that total exports till the end of the 10th month has already crossed $640 billion. Now, at that run rate, in the next 2 months, you have to get about $110 billion more. So I don't see any problem in the government, in the country achieving that goal of $750 billion of exports in the current year. Now, the important point to be noted is that $750 billion will actually mean much lower growth than what we achieved last year. In the sense that 2021-22, we achieved a growth of around 40% to come to $676 billion of merchandise and services exports. And in the current year, if we meet $750 billion of target, our growth rate will be about 11%. So clearly, the global economic situation is casting its impact on India's exports, particularly on the merchandise exports category and not so much on services category. And that is something that we need to be very mindful of, because exports by their very nature are in a very dynamic sector and they respond to global demand impulses very quickly. So if the current rate of growth is just around 11% till January, and the whole year would probably end maybe around 10% or 9% growth, because there is some sort of deceleration in the growth that you can see. As a matter of fact, in January itself, we saw the merchandise exports actually declining. Therefore, we have to be very mindful, very cautious. But as I said, $750 billion target of exports of merchandise goods and services is not going to be difficult at all.
Mr. Bhattacharya, we have seen that the last almost 2 decades, services exports have kind of overtaken merchandise exports. And, at times we see that there is a major, downward trend, different sectors also. Although in India we have, different export promotion councils, whether it is for the gems and jewelry sector, whether it's for textile exports or marine exports or engineering goods exports. Do you think it's time to, shake up these organizations as well, the export promotion councils, and to make them more proactive and see to it that what minor tinkering is needed in the government policy so that our exports in goods actually increases?
That is certainly an option that the government can explore, because we do, as you rightly pointed out, there are quite a few export promotion councils attached to different ministries which have the goal and the responsibility is to make sure that exports get a proper boost from these sectors. And it will help if you strengthen and revamp these councils and make them more target-oriented. But I think there are larger forces at play which influence the trajectory of India's exports, particularly in merchandise goods. One is something that is a little beyond our control. That is the global economic situation at its trend. There is no doubt that export demand in the country, the whole world, showing some sort of tepidness in a sense that economic growth prospects are not looking that bright. If you take a look at both the IMF prospects and the World Bank's prospects for the coming year, you see that growth will not be very, very robust. So if that doesn't happen, then it is very clear that our exports will also suffer, because exports are directly linked to the pace of economic activity. So that is one pressure that we need to contend with. And the second pressure is that to what extent as a country we are plugged into global value chains which help any country move up and push more exports. Unfortunately, the Indian companies' connection with the global value chains are relatively weak, and they are weak for a variety of reasons. We can go into it later. But one of the reasons why they are weak is also because that our free trade agreements, although we have concluded two important free trade agreements with Australia and United Arab Emirates in the last few months, we need to expedite and step up the pace of those agreements to get into more agreements like the European agreement or the UK agreement, because if you get hooked into these agreements and also become members of some regional trade arrangements, then I would believe that our ability to take advantage and get plugged into these global value chains will be easier. That is point number 2. And point number 3 is that while exports are dependent on global value chains and the world economic growth prospects, they are also dependent on what is the state of domestic sector's competitiveness and to what extent the domestic policies are friendly towards exports. While a lot has been done and achieved in improving the ease of doing business in India, there are a few areas, sectoral policy, which is beyond the scope of the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. For example, the labor policy changes. They need to be reformed. There are also some issues with regard to financing of exports. While the production-linked incentive policy have done quite well in some sectors in boosting exports, particularly in the mobile phones, in other areas, the production-linked incentive scheme is probably yet to show the same results. Maybe it's too early to expect those results, but it is a point that needs to be understood and examined and see what more needs to be done to plug those gaps. Therefore, it is important to strengthen promotion councils, but it is equally important to look at all those 3 areas that I just now mentioned.
Mr. Bhattacharya, let's also talk about the Forex reserves of Reserve Bank of India. A year and a half back, we had touched that record high of $640 billion of Forex reserve. From there on, we have come down and now it is hovering around $530 billion. Do you think now the exports can really play a big role, and also the rupee dollar equation has an impact on this? Are we importing a lot and paying in Forex and exporting comparatively less, because of which the Forex reserves have come down a lot?
Foreign exchange reserves are a function not just of importing more or exporting less. It is also a function of how we use those foreign exchange reserves that we have for managing our currencies. So if we have lost a little bit of our Forex reserves, it is also due to the RBI's well-considered policy of reducing volatility in the rupee-dollar exchange rates in the market. I will not link the decline in India's foreign exchange reserves to our higher imports, less exports. That is number 1. Number 2, I do believe India foreign exchange reserves must be looked at not as something that is an asset that needs to be kept and as a matter of pride, because remember that higher imports is not necessarily a bad thing for a growing economy. It depends on what you are importing. Fortunately, we are importing less luxury gold these days than we are importing goods for economic activities, for meeting our own demand, or even for re-exporting purpose. So I am not too worried about this kind of decline in Forex reserves. And actually, we are sitting on a very comfortable level of Forex reserves at this point in time.
Mr. Bhattacharya, before we conclude, I want to bring in this point that in the last 1 year, ever since the Ukraine-Russia war started, India has been importing Russian oil, and through a special arrangement called Vostro accounts, wherein, we pay in rupee itself, in our own currency, and whatever imports are, they are offset with that Vostro account, and they are balanced rupee denomination itself. Can we have this kind of a special arrangement with other countries also, where we can pay in our own domestic currency for both exports and imports?
Doing such trade arrangements poses certain restrictions on the way you want to conduct your exports and imports. With Russia, this Vostro account deal was concluded precisely to address the concerns of an increase in import of Russian crude oil at a time when the global crude oil prices had gone up and the Russian crude oil prices were relatively less. So I think in specific circumstances, this Vostro deal kind of an arrangement is workable, but I do not see any logic or relevance or need for extending this kind of an arrangement with other countries, because after all, trade will have to be open and trade must be conducted in a currency which is accepted by both the trading partners without introducing any distortion or restrictions like what currency to be used. So I would say that it is good to the extent that it allows you to import Russian crude and help them finance their imports from India. But as a matter of principle, this is something that need not be encouraged.
Mr. Bhattacharya, thank you so much for joining us in this discussion.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
India called in the Swiss ambassador and raised the issue of unfounded and malicious anti-India posters in front of the United Nations building in Switzerland's Geneva on Sunday. Sources said that the Swiss ambassador assured Ministry of External Affairs Secretary West Sanjay Verma that he would convey India's concern to Bern with all the seriousness it deserves. The Swiss ambassador also clarified that the posters in Geneva are part of space provided to all, and it neither endorses the claims nor reflects the position of the Swiss government.
Kuwait's Crown Prince reappointed Sheikh Ahmed Nawaf Al Sabah as Prime Minister, asking him to nominate a cabinet on Sunday, according to the state news agency Kuna. This comes more than a month after the government resigned due to increased tensions with the parliament. In the second match of Women's Premier League, that is WPL, Delhi Capitals DC defeated Royal Challengers Bangalore by 60 runs at Brabant Stadium, Mumbai. In the other match, at Dr. D.Y. Patil Stadium in Navi Mumbai, UP Warriors won by 3 wickets against Gujarat Giants. A quick look at the headlines once again. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi sends wishes to Bangladesh's President-elect Mohammad Shahabuddin, says he will be a pillar to improved engagements between both the nations. Defence industry cooperation is an important focus area between India and Bangladesh, says High Commissioner Pranay Verma. India summons the Swiss ambassador and raises concerns over anti-India posters in Geneva. United Nations signs the first High Seas Treaty to bring around 30% of the world's waters under increased protection. And in cricket, UP Warriors won by 3 wickets against Gujarat Giants on the second day of Women's Premier League. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Ghana. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.